Okay, all right. Well, let me think if I can remember. Obviously, you've probably got some data in the scoring program. You'll have data in the Bridgemates themselves. In fact, when the Bridgemates finish session and sign off, the data is still in there and kept in there for however many weeks it is until you use them for the next session. It's only after somebody puts a score in for the next session, their first score in the Bridgemate for the next session, that the data for the entire session from the previous time it was used is becomes no longer accessible. But getting it from the Bridgemates is the worst way to go. It's the means of last resort, as it were. There's also data in your server when things are working well, which is when I mean the server, I mean the little square white or cream box. That's really a transcriber, a transceiver. It sends information. It sends instructions to the Bridgemate users from the Bridgemates. It's in the BWS. That's actually the thing which you had up, which is the grid, which has all. When you look on the screen in Bridgemate Control, that's where you see all the data coming in. That's actually an access database, so it's in there, and it will also be in the log files, the Bridgemate log files, and that records every score entry and erasure or of every session you've run up until when you decide you want to clear it out. I've seen log files of clubs that have 5 or 6 years data in them. That'll be every score that everybody put in or took out or for every table in every session they've played.
So where is the Bridgemate log file kept?
Well, the log file can be in a few different locations. It really depends on where your software. Different scoring programs have put it in allocated different spots. But if you're not sure where it is, it's relatively easy to find in the sense that if you open the Bridgemate control software, and if you go to the tools and the options, and if you look at the general stuff, and you look at file locations, you'll be able to discover it. And it tells you, here we are, it tells you the log files on my particular laptop. It's in CompScore /logs. So it's inside my scoring program and inside a folder called log. Now, for some people, it may be in the folder, the Bridgemate control software folder in the folder where the exe program is. You can put it somewhere else. You can select a different location and put it there. In fact, some of my laptops have different scoring programs on them. And so with those particular laptops, I've got things like the Bridgemate database, the log files, the actual Bridgemate control software located in different well, I don't have multiple copies of those because I want all the data together. So I've got all those files in one location, but it might be the same location as which thing I'd have if I have just a single scoring program on my laptop. So it'll tell you where it is. So either in the scoring program, in the folder with the scoring program, or in the folder with the Bridgemate control package.
So Laurie, can I ask what happens if the end of the session, you're importing the results, and the results don't come in? There's been a problem. Maybe there was a power surge in the middle or something.
Yep.
The results are still there, aren't they? How do I get them back?
All right then. Okay. Well, this was going to be later in the session, but see, everybody seems to be asking the question now. Why don't we do something about it now? Okay. All right. So often, if you're a playing director, everything seems happy in the room, and then you come to the end of the session and you're not quite as happy. That's the type of thing you're talking about, George?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's not too bad, really, because if nobody noticed anything, it means the session was still running and it's still completed, right? So all the data's been put in. People are still happily putting things in the Bridgemates. The server's still happily talking to the Bridgemates, and everything's hunky-dory, except the data hasn't got any further. It's stuck in your server, but it hasn't got into the BWF. And of course, if it's not in the BWF, you can't get it into your scoring program. And what often happens, the cause of that is that at some time during the session, and there's lots of different reasons why it might happen, is you've lost communication or connection with the server your laptop has. Now, there's a multitude of reasons why. For example, ideally you have your server plugged into one of the USB ports. I'd suggest often people have a hub or whatever else they plug into their laptop or into their computer because they have lots of other things they want to plug into their USB ports, and they only have a couple of them. I tend to reserve one of my US ports specifically for the server, and I put the hub on the other thing, and everything else can run off the hub. However, the actual way this package is set up is that often when you plug a device into a USB drive, it allocates a letter to it. You might see a device is allocated a letter D or F, or you plug in a flash drive and you see it might be F, or it might be G, or it might be E or D or something like that. The Bridgemates don't work like that. They don't. There's never a letter, a drive letter assigned, unfortunately. So when something happens and they get a bit confused and they can't find the right port because they work on a virtual port scenario. Often if you're unplugging and plugging in lots of USB devices during the session, that's a good way where sometimes the server gets a bit confused. Another very common situation is during the session you get hit with a Windows update, which happens in the background or doesn't happen in the background. And what happens after that, it reinitializes all the port allocations. In fact, when a Windows update, when you restart, it reinitializes everything, and that includes the port applications. And the system can no longer find the server. And again, you've lost communication. Sometimes it's an old laptop or an old thing. If the ports have been used for a lot, they get worn and they don't always connect so well. Sometimes you've got a faulty cable. There's a million ways that these things happen. But anyway, so all you need to do is reconnect it. Get it to reconnect. Now, often just unplugging the server from the laptop is enough, and replugging it, and it'll search for about 10 to 15 seconds, and often it'll just reconnect. However, if you're going to do things like that, you need to make sure that you're not going to lose all your data out of the server. And so something I do religiously every session before I start is I always open up the back of my server and check that the battery is sitting in properly. The other thing I'm always wary of is not flat or they're not low. If you look at the screen I've got open at the moment, it actually has a battery level thing. See, it's 100% at the moment. So I'm fairly confident that if I unplug my server from my laptop, I'm not going to lose any data because the battery backup will preserve it all. Now, if that battery level gets below 57%, that's when you need to change your batteries. And the other thing that often happens in clubs is if they've got a stand, if it's a PC they're working on, they often leave the PC turned on all the time, and they leave the server connected to the PC, and it's always on power. Now, that's fine, providing you don't have an interruption in power one night or whatever else. If you do, your battery backup will kick in, provided your batteries are okay. But of course, battery backup only lasts for X number of hours. So then if they restore the power a few hours later, you've actually partially drained your batteries. So that next time when you actually might need them, they mightn't be in a condition where they should be. So I always religiously unplug the server box and turn off the power. That also means the server's not sitting there talking to all his bridgemates, or the bridgemates aren't active in the room or capable of being logged on. Anyway, so okay, so you've lost communication, want to get it back. So disconnecting the server and plugging it back in is sometimes enough. If you're a ComScore 2 user, plug the server back in, and if that has, and if you just unplug it and plug it hasn't worked, there is an if you've got a session running, which we have at the moment, but doesn't matter. You can go to the advanced options, and you can hit the relaunch button. Now, relaunch does not do anything in regard to your session data. All it does is reconnect your BWS to your server. That's what it's designed to do. So providing there's a physical link between your laptop and your server, it should link the BWS back or back to the server, and you should then get your data flowing in. It's quite a good option in ComScore 2. Now, don't get confused between that and launch. Hitting the launch button is very dangerous. If you hit the launch button, what you will do is send a whole new set of instructions to the server. And the instructions you'll send are those which are about the setup for the session. In other words, you'll reinitialize the whole session. And it'll be waiting for, and like at the beginning of the session. So now it'll want names in the Bridgemates again. It'll be waiting for scores for round 1. It's exactly what you don't want. In fact, if you do that, you'll actually override all of the information in the server, where what you really want to do is get the information from the server. So with launch, you only ever use launch once in a session. And if you have to restart or open that session again and access it, don't use launch. Go to the advanced options and hit relaunch. Now, at the moment, that's closed. So if I go and hit relaunch, I'm going to get
Does that work with ComScore 3 too, Laurie?
that's what I'm using ComScore 3.
Oh, I thought you said ComScore 2.
Look, probably, well, it does work with both. There we are. But this is ComScore. There, and that's actually the session I had, that dummy session before. So it's got, so it's actually relaunched the session. I can close again there. And so you'll have everything that was in it before. In fact, if I close that one and close that one and open a different one, I'll have some data. Let's choose something from a few last week. Select. For some reason I want to relaunch it, then I can just go and, oh, actually that was an online session. Maybe that wouldn't be good for us. Let's have a look. Oh, well, here's an example for later in the day. And I go to advanced, and I go to relaunch, and up comes the BWS, and there it is. So there's the data there. So back to exactly where we were. And of course, once you relaunch, it'll populate the rest of the session. If it's a port problem, unplug the server, run it on battery, and just reboot the laptop or reboot PC. That'll initialize the port allocations, and then if you plug in the server again, you can use the relaunch. It'll work then. It's pretty trivial, really, once you've done it a couple of times. It's not very difficult. There's much worse things you can do, believe me. In fact, let's be really violent and do something horrible. We've got this data in here at the moment, right? But what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to unplug my server. And not only that, but I'm going to turn off my server. So now I've killed all the data in my server. And now when this happens, it's not like the session's going along happily and everybody not knowing anything. Everybody will now be getting messages on their Bridgemates when they try to put a score in saying cannot send data, retry. And that's because the communication link between the various devices has been severed. The Bridgemates talks to the server talks to the Bridgemate database, the Bridgemate database talks to the scoring program. But we've just taken all the data out of the server, so it can no longer communicate with the Bridgemates at all. The Bridgemates don't know what's happening. And when this happens, if it does, and this is what will happen if you hit launch rather than relaunch as well, by the way, you've got a big problem. You don't want to start the session again. So this is where you need to use some of the other software options within Bridgemate Control. Nothing to do with ComScore. In fact, why don't we get rid of it? In here itself. In order to get the Bridgemates to work and to get the system to work, we need to actually repopulate the server. We need to put all the data instructions back in the server, but not the instructions at the beginning of the session. We want the as of currently what we've got. So what we're going to do, we're going to recover the server. We go to session, and see there's a synchronize recover option. Everybody see it? I'm going to click on it. And you can choose recover or synchronization. We're going to recover, but I just mentioned synchronization is quite good in situations where sometimes at odds you might have a situation where most of your Bridgemates go green and active, but there's one stubborn Bridgemate that seems to stay red all the time, and nobody can use that table can't do anything with it. What you can do with that is you can actually synchronize things. What synchronization does is it actually, well, I'm sure you've done things on your mobile phone, like you've synchronized all the addresses in your mobile phone with what's on the web. So they're both identical. So all we're doing here is we're synchronizing what the Bridgemate database thinks should be there versus what the Bridgemates and server think are there. So if you hit synchronize, it'll delete all the tables out and then rewrite all the tables back. And usually that will activate the stubborn table. And you just go on. So it deletes from the server and any extra weird tables, and then it adds them back in. But we don't want to do that. What we're going to do is actually recover the data. So recover server. This is something which I suggest you do have a practice run at sometime. Do a simple 3-table movement or something. Put a few scores in with a Bridgemate or a couple of Bridgemates for the first round, and then unplug your server and kill it, and kill all your data, and then have a go at putting it back. So I'm going to recover, and here we get all these warning messages, which are really quite frightening. You know, by recovering the server, all current data in the server will be erased. Well, it will be, but of course, at the moment, if you don't get to do this because there's no useful data in the server, and the server will be synchronized with the session database. So we're going to take the data in the BWS and put it back in the server. Are you sure you want to recover the server? Yes. Then it gives you another warning. This will delete all data stored in the Bridgemate server. Are you sure you want to reset it? And you say, yes, I'm brave. And now it gives you a number, a random number, which you repeat, it's telling me 223. And I hit OK. And now what it's doing is taking all instructions and all the data, and it's sending it to back to the Bridgemates. And I have a little report over here which says it's added each table and each round back into the Bridgemate, etc., etc. And that includes the data that it had in the servers, in the Bridgemate control. And now, all these are red at the moment, but now if a player logs on at their table, they will have to. I'm going to pretend I'm table 4 for a moment. I've got a Bridgemate in my hand. I'm going to log on. You see it's gone green now. Dot's gone green. And in fact, I'm ready to put some data in now. And in fact, if I look here, table 4 only has 2 scores in. And if I look at those scores, they're both there in the Bridgemate, and it's ready for the 3rd score of the round. So recovering the servers are a very good general exercise that said you should actually do and practice at home, because it's a bit frightening to do it when you've got a problem. But if you've done it 2 or 3 times in not in anger, as it were, it's a relatively simple process. And you can get all the data back. And that's usually enough to solve most of your problems.
Laurie, can I ask a question, please?
Of course you can.
Okay, so if you've recovered what was in the BWS,
Yep.
and that all goes back to the server, what happens if there was some stuff in the Bridgemates that hadn't got to the server before it died? Will that happen automatically?
Well, no, that won't be true, because the server and the BWS, right, are in constant communication with each other. So anything that somebody put into the Bridgemate prior to being the connection being severed will be in the BWS.
Okay, so nothing
and once the connection's been, once the something's happened to the server, they can't put anything more. In fact, they can't use the Bridgemates at all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people unwisely do something like, they open their session again, they hit launch, and off they go, and suddenly they discover they're all back at round 1. Right? When the problem occurred at round 5, and they've got 5 rounds of data, or I should correct myself, they had 5 rounds of data. So if somebody does that, it's still quite recoverable, because again, you just go in and follow this recovery process, because although you've initialized all the information in the server, you've still got the data held in the BWS. So you just recover and send it back to the server, and now you'll be back to round 5 or the beginning of round 6 or wherever you were.
So Laurie, just to extend from Janet's question,
Yep.
we've had a situation where the computer has lost power, and so
Yep.
the BWS is not being updated, but presumably
Nothing's been updated. Oh,
So-
hold on. Your server, you've lost power, but your server's still working on your batteries?
yeah.
Right. And so your session can still run, can't it? Because your server is talking to your Bridgemates.
So you
So
should
you're
be able,
fine.
so
So
you
you
should
can
be
keep
able
running
to,
your session.
so as long as it's in the server and the server's battery is okay,
Yeah, you're okay.
you
And
should
you've
be
got
able to just
Yeah.
okay.
And if you keep the batteries as they should be, then you've got quite a few hours of power. So providing, and in fact, I've known people to take their server home with them, for example, because the power hasn't come on by the time the session's finished.
Yep.
But in fact, if you do lose power, you can usually run a daytime session and keep going with the battery. At night time, of course, you've got other issues like illumination for the players and whatever else. And I've known people play by candles and whatever else. But yeah, so, and then when you get power back, you simply plug your server back into your laptop or into your PC, open your program, your scoring program, and relaunch it. That will reconnect the BWS to the server, and all the data in the server will flow into the BWS.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Laurie,
Yes.
I had another situation and everything stopped at round 5.
Yep.
So I went home and I went into the session and found the session, and then it came up with that page that you had before.
Yep.
And it said there's another thing I had to tick, and it all came back again, but I can't see it now.
All you need to do is make sure you've got an up-to-date database for scoring purposes. That's your main objective. Okay.